Marcus Elling was 39 years old the morning his wife sat down at a kitchen table he had built with his own hands and told him she wanted a divorce. She had her phone face up, a glass of water she hadn't touched, a composure that had clearly been rehearsed. He drove a 2014 F-150 with a cracked dashboard vent and a company jacket he'd washed so many times the logo was barely readable. He ate lunch from the same Tupperware containers every weekday. Her friends from the Peachtree Corridor called him Steady Marcus behind his back and meant it as an insult, and Vanessa had never once corrected them. She told him she hadn't been happy in years. She told him she needed to find herself. She told him her attorney, a man named Bridwell, who worked out of a glass tower office on Peachtree Street, already reviewed their assets, and she was prepared to be generous. She slid a piece of paper across the table he had built. It listed everything she intended to claim: the house, half the joint account, half the investment portfolio, the lake cabin in Ellijay that Marcus had been renovating board by board for 3 years. The figure at the bottom read $340,000. She told him Bridwell had advised her this was all very straightforward. What Vanessa did not know, what Bridwell was about to discover the hard way, was that Marcus had spent the last 14 years moving with quiet, deliberate precision through a world she had never once thought to look at. The joint account was not the account. The investment portfolio she had cited was not the portfolio, and the property in Ellijay was not technically in either of their names. Bridwell's call came back to her exactly 63 minutes after she slid that paper across the table. She had been smiling when her phone rang. She was not smiling when she put it down. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The morning light came in low through the south-facing windows of the kitchen, the ones Marcus had reframed 3 winters ago when he'd gutted and rebuilt the back half of the house while Vanessa was visiting her sister in Savannah. He had laid the saltillo tile himself, square by square, starting from the center of the room and working outward the way his grandfather taught him, because a floor begun from the center stayed true no matter how the edges wore. He was at the counter now, coffee in both hands, watching the light move across the tile. His grandfather had worked masonry in Birmingham for 31 years before his knees gave out. The man had told Marcus exactly one thing about money that Marcus had never forgotten. "Don't show what you've built," he'd said, pressing a calloused thumb against Marcus's sternum when Marcus was 11 years old. "Show what you're willing to work on." Marcus had taken that seriously. He was a project manager for a mid-tier construction firm called Hargrove Penn. He earned a salary that was respectable but unimpressive. He drove a truck that needed an alignment. He owned a home in a decent neighborhood in southwest Atlanta, a 3-bedroom that Vanessa had always called functional when she was being kind and small when she wasn't. What Marcus had built outside of that visible life was a different structure entirely. But that was not what he was thinking about this particular morning in March. He was thinking about the grout line near the refrigerator that had been slightly off for 6 years, and that he kept meaning to correct. He was thinking about the tomatoes he'd planted along the south fence that were 2 weeks from needing to be staked. He was thinking about the woman who came down the stairs at 7:40, in workout clothes she had not yet exercised in, and kissed him on the cheek with precision that had grown somewhere along the way into something that felt more like an obligation than a greeting. "You have that meeting in Marietta today?" Vanessa asked. "Noon," he said. "I'll probably be late tonight, girls' dinner." She didn't look at him when she said it. She was looking at her phone, which was tilted at an angle that presented its back face toward him, habit that had developed sometime in the past 8 months. Marcus noted it the way he noted everything, without comment, without reaction, with the simple and patient certainty that information eventually found its way to the people who were paying attention. He had met Vanessa at a Habitat for Humanity build in College Park 11 years ago, She had been in a yellow vest 2 sizes too large, wrestling with a box of deck screws, and she had laughed at herself with an ease that Marcus had thought, at the time, was the most unself-conscious thing he had ever seen in another person. They had talked for 3 hours after the build, called her the next morning. She had been warm and direct and genuinely curious about the work he did, and for a long time, for years, truly, she had been exactly the person he believed she was in that parking lot in College Park. He did not know precisely when that person had been replaced by the woman who tilted her phone away. He suspected it had been gradual, the way most demolitions were, not an event but a slow structural compromise, invisible until something finally gave. He heard the notification from the other room before she did. His phone, the sleeker one, the one he kept in the interior pocket of his work jacket and had never once left on a counter, had been quiet all morning. But his email had not. The message that came in at 7:52 a.m. from a sender listed only as Bridwell Family Law was addressed not to Marcus, but forwarded to him by a name. Recognized immediately, he set down his coffee. He picked up his jacket from the hook by the door. "Drive safe," Vanessa called from the other room. "Always do," Marcus said, and walked out. He did not open the email in the driveway. He drove 4 blocks to the Kroger parking lot, put the truck in park, and opened it there. It was a forwarded chain. The original sender was Vanessa. The recipient was a man named Derek Bridwell-esque. The subject line read, "Initial Asset Summary, V. Ellington, Dissolution." It had been sent 16 days ago. Marcus read it twice, slowly. Then he read it a third time, the way a structural engineer reads a load calculation, looking not just at what was stated, but at what the math implied. Vanessa had listed their joint assets with impressive specificity. The house, which she had appraised at $347,000, the joint savings account. The brokerage account she had access to through a shared login Marcus had given her 4 years ago, when they were planning a kitchen renovation and she had needed to transfer funds, the lake cabin, 2 vehicles, his pension contribution. She had submitted this summary 16 days ago. She had been sitting across from him at dinner 8 of those 16 nights. She had asked him on at least 3 of those nights how the Marietta project was coming along. His hands did not shake. He forwarded the email to his own personal address. Then he went to the joint brokerage account and downloaded 3 years of statements. He pulled up the history on the joint savings and found what he was expecting to find. A pattern of small transfers, $400 here, $600 there, over the past 14 months, all moving to an account whose last 4 digits he did not recognize. He photographed the screen. He sat in that parking lot for 22 minutes. When he drove away, he was not going to Marietta. He drove to Buckhead. The building was 12 stories of smoked glass on Piedmont Road, and the office he needed was on the 9th floor. He had used this particular suite only twice before. Once when he structured the Ellijay property, and once when he revised the primary trust, documents the year before. The woman at the front desk knew him by his middle name, which was the name on the account. She told him Patricia was just finishing a call. He sat down in a chair with a clean sightline to the door. His face was calm, had always been calm. His grandfather had called it the long face, the one you wore when the work ahead of you required more patience than anger. Marcus wore it now the same way he wore his work jacket, not as a performance but as the correct tool for the job. Patricia Okafor came out of her office 2 minutes later. She was 58 and had been a family and estate attorney in Atlanta for 27 years, and she had the manner of someone who had long since stopped being surprised by the things people did to each other. She had seen exactly this kind of case before. A spouse who had mistaken a quiet man for an uninformed one and had drawn up documents accordingly. The mistake Patricia had observed over 3 decades was always the same. People confused stillness with emptiness. "Marcus," she said. "Patricia," he said. "My wife hired Bridwell." She held the door open for him and said nothing more until they were seated. He laid his phone on her desk, opened to the forwarded email chain. She read it. She did not flinch. She read it again. set the phone down, and folded her hands on the desk in a way that told him her mind was already 4 steps into the answer. "Do you know who forwarded this to you?" she asked. "Yes, and the transfers. 14 months, approximately $19,400 total. Moving to an account I have no record of." Patricia was quiet for 3 seconds, which for Patricia was a very long time. She cited the J. property. "Yes, she believes it's in your joint name. I know she does. And the brokerage account she listed. The one she has login access to is the secondary account," Marcus said. "The one I used for the renovation funds. There's $44,000 in it. The primary." "She's never asked about the primary," Marcus said. "In 11 years, she never asked." Patricia uncapped a pen. "All right," she said. "Let's build the response." What she laid out over the next 90 minutes was not a legal strategy so much as a geometry, each piece of what Marcus had assembled over 14 years fitting against the next, with the kind of precision that made Vanessa's claim look less like a demand, more like a person who had walked confidently into a room without checking what was on the other side of the door. The primary trust had been established in Marcus's grandfather's name, updated twice, and held assets Vanessa had never been named in or disclosed to. The J. cabin was deeded to a single-member LLC that Marcus had formed 8 years ago under his grandfather's initials. The portfolio Vanessa had cited had a current balance of $44,000. The portfolio she did not know existed had a current balance of $618,000. The transfers she had been making for 14 months amounted to $19,400. Under Georgia law, those transfers from the joint account were considered marital waste, and they were documented. There was one more layer Patricia had requested Marcus gather, and he had gathered it. He opened the second folder and placed it in front of her. It was a printout of Delaware Business Registry records. VE Consulting, LLC had been registered 22 months ago. The registered agent was a formation service in Wilmington. The listed member was Vanessa Ellington. The business had filed no taxes, issued no invoices that Patricia could trace through legitimate channels, and had processed $19,400 in deposits over 14 months. The same $19,400 currently missing from the joint account. Patricia studied the pages without speaking. "She moved the money through a business she set up to receive it," Marcus said, "which she didn't disclose in her asset summary to Bridwell." "Correct." Patricia set down the page. She looked at Marcus across her desk with the direct, unadorned expression of a professional who understood exactly what the moment called for. "You didn't miss anything," she said. "Not one thing." She said it without warmth or sentiment, which made it land exactly as it should, as a clean statement of fact from someone with no reason to flatter him. Real power operated in quiet rooms. "She came prepared," Patricia said. "She just didn't come prepared enough." Marcus said nothing. "Bridwell is going to pull the title on J this week," she continued. "When he sees the LLC, he'll know. He'll call her back." "I know," Marcus said. "Do you want to be in the room when she gets that call?" Marcus thought about the tile in his kitchen, the floor begun from the center, laid to stay true at the edges. He thought about 11 years. He thought about a woman in a yellow vest who had once laughed at herself with perfect ease. "No," he said quietly. "Let her have the room to herself." He drove home by way of Cascade Road the long way, stopped at his Uncle Roland's house on the way. Roland Ellington was 73. And had worked 30 years as a boilermaker before retiring to a house on a half-acre lot where he grew collard greens and kept a workshop cleaner than most operating rooms. He was the one living member of Marcus's family who had watched the whole arc, the grandfather's wisdom, the years of careful work, the marriage to Vanessa, the slow change Marcus had noticed before he named it. He poured 2 mugs of coffee without being asked and set one in front of Marcus. "She pulled the trigger," Roland said, 16 days ago. Roland nodded slowly. He drank his coffee. On the wall behind him was a framed photograph of Marcus's grandfather in his work clothes. Birmingham, 1871, squinting into the sun with his arms folded. "You know what he used to say about a foundation," Roland said, not really asking. You don't find out what it's worth until something pushes against it, Marcus said. That's right. Roland set his mug down. You've been building right for a long time, son. The building's already done. You're just documenting now. Marcus nodded. One more thing, Roland said. He slid a small envelope across the kitchen table. Her mother dropped this off here 3 weeks ago. She asked me to hold it until you needed it. I think you need it now. Inside the envelope was a handwritten note from Vanessa's mother, Loretta, a folded photocopy of a bank statement Marcus did not recognize. The account was not in Vanessa's name. It was in the name of a man named Corey Samples. The balance history went back 22 months. The deposits were regular and came from a source coded as VE Consulting, a business entity Marcus had never heard of, because Vanessa had never told him she owned one. The business had been registered in Delaware. It had been set up, according to a second document Loretta had included, exactly 4 months after she and Marcus returned from their last real vacation together, a week in Hilton Head that Marcus had thought of at the time as a good sign. He sat at Roland's table for a long moment. Her own mother, Marcus said quietly. Her own mother, Roland said. Loretta called me when she found it. Said she wasn't going to watch her daughter do what she was doing to a good man and say nothing. Marcus refolded the documents and placed them back in the envelope. He put the envelope in his interior pocket, next to his phone. Some things, Roland said, take longer to fall apart than they do to build. That doesn't mean they were ever solid. Marcus drove home. He was there by 4:30. He defrosted chicken thighs and made rice and set the table the way he always did, 2 plates, the good napkins on Tuesdays. Vanessa came home at 7:15. He said the chicken had turned out well, and she said she wasn't very hungry, and he cleared the plates and washed them. Went to bed at a reasonable hour. He slept without difficulty. The next morning he called Patricia and told her to prepare everything. Vanessa had chosen the location herself, a restaurant in Virginia Highland called Orchard and Stone, where she and her friends had bottomless brunch every 3rd Sunday. She felt at home there. She had suggested it to Bridwell as the place where Marcus could receive the settlement paperwork. A public location, neutral ground, she'd said. She arrived 8 minutes late. She was with Bridwell, a trim man in a good suit who carried a leather portfolio with the quiet confidence of someone who had done this many times and expected to finish quickly. She stopped when she saw the table. Marcus was there. Patricia Okafor was beside him. On Marcus's other side was Roland in his cleanest clothes, hands folded on the table, with the stillness of a man who had nothing to prove. Across from Roland sat Loretta Graves, Vanessa's own mother, who met her daughter's eyes and did not look away. Vanessa said, "Mama, what are you?" "Sit down, Vanessa," Loretta said. Bridwell was already recalibrating. You could see it in the small tightening around his eyes as he reviewed the room and understood that the dynamic he had prepared for was not the dynamic present. He sat, Vanessa sat. Marcus did not speak immediately. He waited until the server had brought water to the table and excused himself. Then he placed a manila folder in the center of the table and opened it. "I had Patricia prepare a response to your asset summary," he said. His voice was level. It was always level. "She'll walk you through the primary items." Patricia opened her own folder. She was efficient and clear, the way she always was, and she did not editorialize. She cited the LLC holding title on the LJ cabin and its filing date. She cited the primary trust and the assets it held. She cited the secondary brokerage account, the one Vanessa knew, and noted its balance. She cited the primary brokerage account and noted its balance. Bridwell stopped writing halfway through the second page. Vanessa was looking at her hands. Patricia continued. She cited the transfers from the joint account. The $19,400 over 14 months, each transaction dated and documented. The recipient account now traced through VE Consulting to a personal account held jointly with Corey Samples. She placed a single sheet in front of Bridwell. He studied it for a moment and then placed his pen on the table. Under Georgia statute, Patricia said without inflection. The dissipation of marital assets in anticipation of divorce proceedings carries significant implications for equitable distribution. The transfers, combined with the undisclosed business entity, constitute a demonstrable pattern. She closed her folder. The restaurant hummed around them. Someone at the bar laughed at something. Vanessa looked up at Marcus. There was something in her expression that might have been calculation, or might have been the last reflex of a woman who had relied on a certain version of him for a very long time. "Marcus," she said, "you have to know this wasn't." "Don't," Loretta said from across the table. Just the one word. Her daughter's name would have been softer. What she gave instead was a full stop. Bridwell cleared his throat. "I think we need to revisit the client's position before we—" "You already know what the revised position is," Patricia said. "You pulled the Elijah title this morning. That's why you called her before we sat down." Bridwell did not deny it. Marcus stood. He gathered his folder. He buttoned his jacket, his good one, dark wool, the one he wore when the work required it. And he looked at Vanessa for what he understood would be one of the last times in any room that mattered. "Not angry," he said. "I want you to understand that. I built everything you thought you knew because I was building for us. When you decided to build against me instead, I just kept doing what I've always done." He paused. "I built the response." He walked out of Orchard and Stone into a clear Atlanta afternoon, and he did not look back, and behind him the table was very quiet. 7 months had passed like water off a new roof. Marcus was on the back porch of a house in East Point, not the Cascade Road house, which had sold during the settlement proceedings, but a house he had owned for 4 years under the same LLC that held the Elijah Cabin, 3-bedroom craftsman with a yard that ran long to the south and received full afternoon sun from October through April. He had spent the first 2 months doing exactly what he had intended to do with it, before the marriage had narrowed his attention, refinishing the clorang, floors, rebuilding the back fence, putting in a raised bed garden along the south wall where the light was best. The tomatoes were doing well. 3 varieties, and all 3 had come in heavy. There was a woman named Celeste who came by on Thursday evenings and sometimes Sunday mornings. She was a structural engineer with the city's permitting office, quiet and direct, with a habit of asking the kind of questions that required actual answers. She had seen the garden on her first visit and said, "You know what you're doing," which was not a compliment so much as a simple observation. And Marcus had liked that about her from the start. She was inside now, making coffee, because she had learned where he kept everything without being told, and had never once asked if that was all right. Marcus had expanded his stake in Hargrove Penn to a managing partnership. He had completed the Elijah Cabin and listed it for seasonal rental. He had joined the board of a workforce development nonprofit in the West End that trained young men from the neighborhood in skilled trades. He had planted a Japanese maple along the east fence line that would take years to reach its full height, which was part of why he'd chosen it. What he knew of Vanessa came to him through Roland, who heard it from Loretta, who reported it without bitterness but without softness either. Vanessa was in Smyrna now, a 1-bedroom in a complex near the interstate. The consulting business had been dissolved. Bridwell had not been able to recover her legal fees. Corey Samples, whose name Marcus had found on that bank statement, was no longer in Atlanta. He had gone to Charlotte, reportedly, and whatever he had taken with him had not included Vanessa. Her former network, the women from the Peachtree Corridor brunches, had grown quiet. Social cost had a way of accumulating in exactly the places it was most intended to. Press. Loretta had sent Marcus a card at Christmas. It said only, "I'm glad you were the man I thought you were." He had put it in the drawer with the few things he kept. The morning light came off the raised bed and caught the dew on the tomato leaves, beating in the sun with the unhurried patience of something that had been given what it needed and allowed to grow. Marcus drank his coffee. The maple was barely shoulder height. In 15 years it would be the shade anchor of the whole yard. He was in no rush. Some things, he thought, were worth the patience to build right. He was free. He was solvent. He was unbothered. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.